Hi everyone, it's Tony D again with a follow-up to the Comic Book Peace Summit video. So I've tried to shoot this video 4 or 5 times. Hopefully I can get it right this time. Things are not going well. I don't think the Peace Summit's going to happen. Here's what's happened since the previous video. I tried to post the link around, generate some, I don't know, attention for it. I posted in areas I thought comic skaters might visit or see. I tried to get it to people like Meyer and Ethan Van Sciver, but I don't know if they saw it or not. The only contact I may have had with comic skaters are a couple of people who commented on the YouTube video. Excuse me. And they didn't seem too receptive. I then tried to go into a Facebook thread, not calling anybody out, but there were several people I used to know in the comic industry. I hadn't really talked to them in a while. So I thought, you know, being a guy who'd been in the comic book industry for 20 years, I didn't think that I would be perceived as some sort of monster for wanting to suggest that, hey, maybe we could get together and talk this out. So that did not go well. People are still super raw about Comicsgate and what's going on. They are not interested in peace. That would be the, I don't know about the comic skaters, but the other side, and I call them the other side because the first thing they did in the conversation was call me out on my language. They said, you can't use SJWs because that's a derogatory term and no one likes to do that, and people criticize people like that. SJW, social justice warrior, not a derogatory term. If you want to say that I used it in a derogatory way, that's your opinion. That was not my intent. As I said in the previous video, it was for lack of a better term. I was a social justice warrior myself back in the day. You know, in the 80s, the Republicans tried to turn the word liberal into a bad word. And, you know, I was a proud liberal. I was all about it. So I think, you know, from there it just went downhill. So I don't think anybody's truly interested in my offer of having a peace summit on the other side. They seem very caught up in one-upping each other on how bad Comicsgate is and how bad Comicsgate has been to them personally. So, what I would say to that and those people, I would say it's not good that you feel that you've been harassed and maligned online. Nobody should be harassed and maligned. But there's a difference between being harassed and criticized. There's a difference between being, you know, harassed on a regular basis and someone who's just a jerk. I don't know. It's very hard to parse these things. I didn't see everything that happened on the internet. No one has. I know that the comic skaters are not totally innocent choir boys. I also don't think, and some of the people in the Facebook threads implied this, if not outright said it, that they're white nationalists. That to me is hyperbolic. It's, you know, Richard Meyer may not be a great guy, but he's part of a mixed race family. And that's not what a white nationalist would be. It's just simply the way it is. So when the other side calls out Comicsgate and says they're all racist, that accusation sounds hollow because it's not true. There may be racist among them. They may even say racist things, but to say they're all racist, that they're all Nazis, and that this movement is terrible and needs to be stopped, is a bit hyperbolic. Also, there seems to be this idea that Comicsgate is too small, and it's small and insignificant, and therefore fuck those guys, we don't need them. but at the same time that they're doing all this damage. I think the reality is Comicsgate is smaller than the other side by a wide margin. However, they're not as small as you think, and the amount of damage they could do could be considerable. Not because, you know, they are going to do a lot of physical damage, but because the points they have that are true are going to be more self-evident the longer this drags out. If the other side refuses to address, for instance, the fact that a lot of the comic book stories have become extremely political, but that politics is only on one side, that's going to, again, undermine the other side's arguments that Comicsgate is bad and should be stopped. If you truly believe that comics book or Comicsgate guys are bad, you need to give them an avenue to not being bad. There needs to be an avenue towards redemption. I asked some of the people on the other side, what should Comicsgaters do? Should they crawl under a bridge and die? And some people said yes. Yes, I hope they go under a bridge and die with their fans. That's pretty harsh. You can maintain that position if you want, but those people in Comicsgate, if you draw that line in the sand and say, you're on the other side, you're never going to get back over here, fuck you, then they will have nothing to lose by lobbing, you know, ideological Molotov cocktails all over you all day long. They don't have anything to lose. What do they have to lose then? If you won't create a path for them to go, okay, you know, I'm sorry, I went too far. If there can't be a path to that, then they will do a lot of damage on their way out, assuming the other side just overwhelms them and steamrolls them into nothing. I don't think that's going to happen, because some of the ideological things that Meyer points out in his videos are relevant and point to a weakness on the other side. It has nothing to do with, you know, calling people names. It has everything to do with how comic books are perceived and how the politics within comic books is hurting it. And to keep saying, no, 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 it's not hurting it, we're on the right side of politics, so it's okay, that's going to hurt things in the long run. Because politics is cyclical. You know, there was a time, I remember when George Bush was running for president, and I looked at that guy and I said, wow, that guy's a criminal. He's going to jail. And a few months into his presidency, I was convinced even more that, oh, this guy, there's no way he lasts an entire term. He's going to be impeached. There's no way this guy is like a criminal. He stole the election. You know, I was totally convinced this guy, nobody would ever listen to him. And then I would look at stuff in the media, and before 9/11, yeah, you know, people were talking, you know, he definitely wasn't going to get a second term. You know, it was all going to go away after 4 years. And then 9/11 happened. And then Bush's ratings went through the roof. And suddenly, the entire landscape changed. Suddenly, the Dixie Chicks, when they came out on stage and made an anti-war statement, were getting banned. You know, and that was at a time when September 11th was relatively raw. People were emotional. You know, now you look back on that. I mean, what do you think of the Dixie Chicks now? They were awesome to stand up and say that. What do you think of Michael Moore at the Oscars when he, you know, made a comment about a fake president? I mean, people look back on that now and say, hey, yeah, those guys were right, but not when it happened. When it happened, it was fuck those guys. Fuck those unpatriotic assholes. We were attacked. I'm justified in everything I do because we were attacked. those guys are assholes. I'm burning my Dixie Chicks memorabilia. I'm not going to listen to Michael Moore anymore. That's the way people are. They get emotional and they get caught up in things. The Comicsgate, whatever you call it, situation has exposed deep rifts in the comic book community. Political, social, you know. Is that good? It's neither good nor evil. It happened. Some of it's good. Some of it is bad. A lot of it's bad. It's bad because people are reacting so poorly to it. They're not processing it properly. They are calling people out on social media. I mean, you look at Twitter specifically. You know, Twitter had this thing where they said, okay, we're going to clean up Twitter. We're going to get rid of all these racists. And they went too far. Right? So people got kicked out off of Twitter who were conservative but weren't racist. But the people on the other side of that equation didn't care. Most of them. They said, oh, well, it's no big deal. One less Republican to worry about. That's not fair. And then we have the situation with Will Wheaton. So Alex Jones was still on Twitter. Will Wheaton announced that him and his followers would leave Twitter for 30 days. At the end of 30 days, his account would be permanently deleted and his followers wouldn't come back unless they got rid of Alex Jones. Twitter refused, and you could argue whether or not Twitter was right to do that. You know, whatever, but so Wheaton left. He went on a different site called Mastodon, I believe it was called. And Mastodon was, for lack of a better term, left-leaning Twitter, something that would align more with his politics. Well, it turns out Will Wheaton has views of his own that people on Mastodon didn't like. And then he got booted off of Mastodon. And after he got booted off, booted or banned, I'm not, you know, it was like a ban, which I think was going to lead to a removal. But so now he's had to come out and say, or he did at the time, I have to rethink things. Yeah, I guess you do. You know, what goes around comes around, Will Wheaton. So, you know, there's this idea in the United States of freedom of speech, that people can say things, even horrible things, and not, you know, as long as they're not acting on them, as long as they're not threats. And I get it. Some of the Comicsgaters, some of the things they say, some people have told me were threatening or harassing. There's a very gray area in there. There is, you know. And some people have said stuff online and they've got them in trouble. And the rules are usually unequally applied. There's no doubt about it. There is injustice in the world. I acknowledge that. But we also have to acknowledge people are flawed and sometimes they make mistakes. Sometimes in the heat of the moment they say things they don't mean. So in the Facebook thread, talking to the other side, you know, these guys literally said, you know, should Comicsgate go die under a bridge? And yeah, they were like, yeah. Now, do those people really mean that? I mean, think about that for a second. Do they mean that they would be fine with watching online a news story about some of these people dying under a bridge, actually dying? I don't think they really mean that. You know, it's their posturing like, yeah, I hate those guys. Good people of the world embrace their enemies to a certain degree. Now, part of the argument on the Facebook thing was about moral relativism. They said, besides the fact that they disowned me as a possible arbiter, they said that we cannot allow Comicsgate to come up and have moral relativism to us. Well, that assumes that you have the moral high ground completely and unquestionably. I don't know how you would determine that. Everybody feels like they have the moral high ground. You know, there was this guy, and I linked it in the discussion. He went to the South. He was African American, and he talked to KKK members and talked them out of being white nationalists. I mean, it's an amazing story, right? That a black man could go to the South, talk to white nationalists, and befriend them, and come out of it with 200 people not in white nationalism. Now, what would you say to him? Would you say that guy was using moral relativism? Would you say he's a terrible arbiter? Would you say he's a terrible person? Do you say he supports white nationalism? I don't think you would. The other side accused me of being with the comic skaters. I'm not a comic skater. I don't know really any of the guys in Comic Skate. I've heard of a couple of them. I might have run into a few at a con. Donald DeLay's name sounds super familiar to me. I might have interacted with him online. I don't remember. But I don't have a project at Comic Skate. I'm not working with these guys. The guys that I talked to on Facebook, some of them I had worked before and some of them I knew before. But they were extremely negative towards me. And I'm not crying about that, but I felt that it was negativity because I would dare to suggest the moral relativism that they did not like. One of my responses was to post the scene where Obi-Wan in one of the prequel movies says, "The Sith only deal in absolutes." So that was my response to one of the posters. This is where the discussion really went downhill. I probably shouldn't have done that. It just started a little mini meme war and I got trolled. So anyhow, the reason I posted it was, are you like the Sith? Do you only deal in absolutes? Is there no path for the comic skaters to get redemption or make peace? One poster said, in the movie, the Sith challenge the moral compass of the Jedi and win because Obi-Wan is dealing in an absolute when he says only the Sith deal in absolutes. Which is interesting to me, an interesting response, but it sort of fails to address the fact that the Sith killed a bunch of people or that the war killed a bunch of people. During the North Korea-South Korea thing that's still going on, there were a lot of people who, in the media, who came out and said, we can't have moral relativism with North Korea. To elevate, to even talk to North Korea is to elevate them and legitimize the regime, which wasn't true. It doesn't legitimize anything if you're just talking to someone. Doesn't mean I believe you. Doesn't mean anything. It just means there's a conversation happening. Now, what is said in that conversation, that may indicate whether or not a person believes. And you may think, oh, well, you have way too much sympathy for Comic Skate for me, but whatever. I would like to see the hurtful dialogue on both sides get tamped down. So I would like to see personal attacks eliminated for the comics book community. Now, I know that's probably impossible, but I think it would be possible to have a comic book summit in which two sides come together and agree on that. And if the leaders of the major factions in comics all agreed, yeah, we don't engage in personal attacks, we don't engage in, bad behavior, and we all agreed to sort of call people out, especially our fans, when they did engage in that behavior, it wouldn't eliminate it, but it would certainly make it a friendlier atmosphere. And I think that's what we want. We want a friendlier atmosphere in comics, regardless of who's in it. I realize that people can't imagine this, but, maybe sometime in the future the comic skaters would just be other guys making comics. Maybe. Or that you could continue to say, no, we'll never let them in. I'll die on that hill before I let a comic skater ever come to a convention I'm at. I watch a lot of videos online. One of the videos I watched was Dr. Jordan Peterson being interviewed by a guy in Australia, and they were talking about how people virtue signal. So the Australian host was talking about he was in a bar and he didn't think, Australians were very PC. They didn't put up with that, but he was in a bar talking to a New Zealander and he was sort of getting to know the person, and he said something like, "Oh, where are you originally from?" Because I guess he didn't look like someone who was from New Zealand and wanted to figure out his ethnic background or whatever. He said a woman in the restaurant who wasn't in the conversation suddenly inserted herself in the conversation and said, "That's racist." And he felt bad, and he was shocked, and he didn't know what to do. And Peterson's reaction was, "Well, see, she was scoring virtue points against you and making you feel bad. She was making herself feel good, and you feel bad." That's what some of the other side is doing. Now, it's not everybody. Certainly, there have been people who were insulted and hurt and attacked, but there are other people who are just saying that, or just piling on, or just exaggerating. A guy called me names, and he was clearly against Comicsgate. Clearly. Was I attacked? Was I harassed? Well, it happened one time. I reported it on the platform I was using, and that's it. I don't need to be a victim about it. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't report things or that you shouldn't speak out when somebody's rude, but I am saying you have to keep it in context. There are a lot of rooms on the internet, and they turn into echo chambers, and people, build up more and more and more. I mean, that's definitely what's happening in politics, and now it's trickled down into comics. And it's not healthy. For a while, I was dreading, for a few days, I was dreading looking at my Facebook feed, just because I got into this conversation and I was checking it, and it was 24 hours of pure hell. I was like, oh man, these guys are not responding well. I don't know what to do. I'm trying to be truthful and nice and logical and peaceful, but I guess I'm not the peace negotiator I imagine myself to be, so maybe I'm not the right guy for this job. Perhaps someone with a big name like Gail Simone, Mark Waid, and look, I know some of the big names have attempted to cool things down with Comicsgate. I know Joe Quesada did, somebody pointed that out. I saw some of that. I don't know if Joe's really the right guy. He's in management at Marvel. There's kind of some stuff he can't say or not say. I think one of the big names, maybe somebody like Mark Waid, although Mark Waid kind of attempted to and then got burned, so I seriously doubt he wants to. I don't know if he has the temperament for it. Maybe some big name in comics will come along and say, well, look, I'm willing to arbitrate this. I would be totally happy if that happened. I'd be willing to help out any way possible. If people believed I would be some sort of, a blight on that process, well then fine. I'd be happy to stay home and make webcomics, which is what I do. So, but if there's no path to redemption, the Comicsgate guys have no reason to be nice to you, other side. So they'll continue to be mean, and if you manage to make their world smaller and smaller by cutting off their opportunities, they have even more reason to go after you and become embittered and entrenched in their belief system. And along the way, they will damage a lot of people if that happens. I don't think that's going to happen. I think there's a day of reckoning coming for comics, and it's not going to be pretty. A lot of people have lived in the world of comics for a long time, and they kind of deny the economics of it and the reality of it and how it exists and what it's for. Superhero comics live in an isolated bubble, and it's amazing they've lasted as long as they have, because there's so many other comics in the world for so many different things. That may be finally coming to a crashing end, and the direct market may collapse with it, and we may be seeing a completely different landscape. So it may be a really bad time for us to spend all this time infighting, as the market collapses and the world of the comics shrink, we just go down like stabbing each other. I'll tell one more story. Great story. There was a woman who was in the Dutch resistance during World War II. She was 14. She just passed away. Great article about her. Google it when you get a chance. She joined the resistance. It was a group of girls. They were nice looking. They would go to bars and they would chat up Nazis and they would lure them into the woods and they would kill them. And it's an amazing story. They had excerpts of her interviews over the years, and she said something like, "We were not built for this. We spent time crying." She was the first one of the group to actually kill a Nazi, and she felt bad. Here the Nazis were these evil people who were killing her family, friends, doing horrible things to her country. She joins the resistance, she kills them, she's fighting back, and she still has enough humanity to feel bad for what she's done. That's amazing. That's an amazing testament to humanity, that this woman could still feel that way, and that she didn't brag about killing Nazis. She didn't say, "Oh, I killed lots of Nazis. I must have killed 50 Nazis." No, she was upset. War is not a good thing, and she, tried to move on with her life and build a good family and remain positive in her world. And she's just incredible. It's sad that she's gone. So the reason I bring this story up, if we're not going to have peace, we're going to have war by default. If we're going to have war, there's going to be horrible casualties. And whether you're on the right side or the left side or the correct side or the incorrect side, you are not going to feel good. Your humanity is in danger. This fight hurts us all. If you are on the right side and you wish comic skaters die under a bridge, I wonder how you're going to feel if one of them actually does. What one of them actually does, and then you read about him, and he was a struggling guy, and he had lots of problems, and he and he kills himself. I wonder how you would feel then. I don't think you would feel great. You might posture on the internet and say, "Oh, that was awesome," but I think in the end, there would be a little part of you that would die. So, I'm for peace. I would like to see us speak in the comics community freely and live together and tolerate each other. If you're for that, great. Contact me. Maybe we could do something. Until another opportunity arises or things change, I don't really see the Comic Book Summit, Peace Summit happening anytime soon. But I've made my offer. I know that I did what I could based on my resources, and so I'm not going to feel like I lost a piece of my humanity in this. I'm not going to attack anyone. So I hope you will consider peace. I hope you will consider maybe just not participating in this battle or whatever it is. Maybe just making comics and acknowledging good and bad and just going on with your life and being positive. So that's what I'm going to do. So peace out and good luck to you all. Thank you.